Hello everyone, and welcome to my talk called A Look at Behaviorism in the Classroom. We will begin by looking at the core concepts of behaviorism and then critique the theory, looking at the key characteristics. This will involve analysing the strengths and weaknesses with support of academic evidence and through personal experience, and also by briefly comparing it to the constructivist theory. Finally, based on the points we've discussed, we'll summarise how well the behaviourist approach can be used in the classroom. So hopefully you get something out of this. Behaviourists believe that learning can be described as a stimulus and response scenario which results in a person's behaviour being changed or permanently or relatively permanently. This learning is gauged by witnessing observational changes and is otherwise known as operant conditioning. There are two main types of conditioning. The first one is classical conditioning and was made famous by Pavlov and his salivating dogs. As described by MacLeod in Simple Psychology, classical conditioning is about creating associations between two unrelated stimuli to produce an automatic response. So, for example, at the sound of a bell, children become alert. By associating the sound of the bell with being ready for school, and through repetition, when children hear the bell ring, they know they have to be ready for school. Operant conditioning is the second type, and it was developed by Thorndike and Skinner. Its significant difference from classical conditioning is that it acknowledges that humans can initiate behaviour, and that is conscious and intentional or voluntary behaviour. Unlike classical conditioning, it doesn't depend on an automatic response and doesn't assume that all human responses are as a result of external stimuli. Both types of conditioning, however, aim to shape behaviour by way of positive or negative reinforcement, which in the classroom is normally a rewards or punishment-based system. One of the strengths of behavioural theory is its effectiveness in shifting negative behaviours quite rapidly and encouraging positive behaviours to keep on going. In the case of classroom management, this can be a really good thing, and this is discussed by Ford and Lyons in their book titled Classroom Management. My recollection of a learning behaviour experience is from prep year, and it illustrates the saying, catching them at being good. At the beginning of the year, the teacher would direct us to the mat and then ask us to sit up straight with our legs crossed, looking at her ready for listening. The person sitting up the straightest would have their behaviour reinforced with praise by the teacher, which of course encouraged the behaviour to continue. However, the students not doing the right behaviour, sitting correctly, would have their behaviour shaped by way of verbal reinforcement, prompting them with things such as, look at this child who's doing the right thing, comparing them to that student. One boy in our class was really big and tall, and he actually found it quite uncomfortable to sit with his legs crossed. In the end, he was allowed to sit in a different position, but this highlights one of the limitations of behavioural theory, because for this child, the association of coming to the mat would be linked with actual physical pain and also not doing the right thing, and so it was not a positive association with learning. The notion of doing the right or wrong thing is also linked to a student's motivation. And from a behaviourist point of view, all motivation comes from external sources. Initially, intrinsic motivation by way of incentives is a really good way to stimulate learning and also promote a positive association with designated tasks. But as Crystal Valerio mentions in her paper, Intrinsic Motivation in the Classroom, teachers can run the risk of sending out the wrong message to students, and that is that it's being the best that counts and not giving something a go. Valerio goes on to say that rewards and incentives should be used in conjunction with intrinsic motivators such as goal setting or teacher enthusiasm. This encourages students to want to learn rather than creating a dependent relationship between student and teacher. Another term of the behaviourist theory, which I see as a limitation, is the term tabula rasa, which is Latin for scraped tablet, or in our language probably just a blank slate. Behaviorists favour nurture over nature philosophy, believing humans to be empty of any knowledge, and their only way of acquiring it is through interpretation of external stimuli. This is a narrow view in my opinion, and it discounts genetics and leaves no room for individualism or personality. It views learners as passive vessels, all in need of filling up with the same information, and we know this isn't the case. The constructivist view of learning is a more realistic theory, as it acknowledges learners as individuals who need to create their own meaning in order to learn. This is outlined by Duchesne and McMahon in our text titled Educational Psychology for Teaching and Learning. It highlights that learners have individual needs and prior knowledge acquired through various socio-cultural factors. So in summary, whilst behavioural theory can have the benefit of shaping behaviour for classroom management with really fast results, it can also produce negative associations with learning, and there are also ethical concerns for its use. Rewards and incentives can be used as motivators to a degree, but children need to be taught how to motivate themselves for internal reasons rather than external rewards, as this will give them independence and autonomy over their learning. Thirdly, creating a classroom environment that encourages students to learn from each other and values students for their individuality is a more meaningful way to learn, rather than the behaviourist premise of tabula rasa, which assumes that all students are empty, all awaiting the same external stimuli before they can respond. As a person in my 20s, just to summarise, I had a job in a local cafe, and my boss said to me, lead by example. And he meant it in reference to all of the tasks that needed to be done as a manager. I think this phrase lends itself well to the classroom, because you shouldn't just aim to alter your students' behaviour by way of expecting them to do something. You need to model their behaviour, and that way they should develop. So to quote Mahatma Gandhi, I'm going to say, you must be the change you wish to see in the world, or maybe just in your classroom.